start thinking accessibility, because you're leaving a lot of money, a lot of potential customers out there on the table just because you haven't designed or haven't thought about ensuring that your site is keyboard accessible.
So what we're saying here is there's shoppers out there that literally want to buy from you and they just can't even, I know there's awesome clothes in there. I've heard there's awesome clothes in there, but like they just won't open the door for me. Soon, if they just open the door, I'll go and buy all the stuff.
That's exactly right.
Welcome to Built Online. I'm Cody McGuffie, and this podcast is all about one thing: building the business of your dreams. Selling art, teaching classes, starting a blog, launching a brand, whatever your passion is, we show you how to turn it into real income. I created EverBee to help anyone with a dream start and scale a business.
EverBee.
And we now serve over 800,000 creators all across the globe. On this show, we bring on real entrepreneurs who've done it. They share their secrets, they share their failures, the exact steps that you can take to get started. What if you can get one golden nugget out of today's episode, and it's the breakthrough that takes you from just dreaming to actually living a life on your terms? At EverBee, we believe that every human is a creator, and every creator should own a business.
Mike, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, Cody. Good to hear from you. Good to see you. We've been talking about doing this session for at least a month or so now.
I know, finally made it happen. Very grateful for your time and super excited to have you on to talk about a subject that I've never talked about before, frankly. And yeah. I imagine a lot of people listening to this have never heard or talked about the subject either. And so I kind of get to play two parts. One, I get to be myself and actually ask curious questions, but also two, I get to kind of play extra curious on behalf of anybody else listening to this. So very excited to have you on.
Very cool. Yeah. And sorry, I'm overdressed for this part, but I've got a couple of other meetings later on today and I need to wear a tie for it. Otherwise I'd just be with my t-shirt and probably make it a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, this is a great conversation. This is an important conversation because most people don't realize that 1 in 4 adults, even in the United States, has a disability, some kind of a disability.
What kind of disabilities are you talking about here? So when you say 1 in 4, it's 25%, by the way, of the population. Yeah. So it's massive. Yeah. What kind of disabilities are we thinking here?
Well, we're talking about the profound disabilities for sure. People who are blind, people who are deaf, have hearing loss, people who have mobility or fine motor control loss, physical disabilities. But actually the largest portion of individuals with disabilities in the world, not just here, in the US, are individuals with some form of cognitive disability. They're often referred to as hidden disabilities because you and myself, wouldn't know if I would know if you were, say, for example, dyslexic. That would be a cognitive disability. So those tend to be the largest portion of individuals with disabilities throughout the world.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, so now we're already understanding like how big this market is, or when I say market, meaning like just how big is this impact, right? It's like what kind of, because when I think about accessibility, first I'm thinking like, oh, that's a big corporate thing to think about. That's what I think about as a small business owner. I'm like, that just sounds like something that you worry about that when you start worrying about compliance and you start worrying about and I hate to say it that way, but it's true though, right? Because you're worried about making a dollar and being profitable.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the laws, most of the standards that have been devised over the last 25, 30 years have been around or really positioned at large organizational structures, whether it's government, education, or business. But those big, huge vertical markets, if you will, a lot less so in terms of small businesses until recently. Okay. We can talk about that as we go.
I would like to, yeah. 'Cause I like to think about things as how do we align incentives, right? So it's like there's this group of individuals that have a disability, so they're underserved,
right?
But the small business isn't necessarily incentivized to kind of serve them, right? Or they don't think that they are. Exactly. But if we present it in a way where when you actually do serve them, it actually serves you, and as soon as you align those incentives, that's how great business happens, right? It's a win-win-win for everybody. Yeah,
exactly.
And so the goal for this conversation is to share, like kind of relook at this and almost reposition this thing as actually this thing that you've never really thought about is actually a big opportunity to serve, one, people who have disabilities, but two, actually serve yourself and your business and making sure, which serves your family and your community. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, great points. I mean, so right away I'm starting to think about, well, especially from the creators, small business markets, what is it that they're not thinking about that big businesses always have to think about? So the
Mm,
big businesses are always dealing with compliance. They're probably dealing with legal standards and litigation and things like that, related to laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? Human rights. But if I'm a small business and I'm getting myself started, what am I looking for? First of all, I come up with a great idea, or I think I've come up with something cool, right? And then I'm looking for, well, who is this going to work for? And generally speaking, most individuals, doesn't matter what kind of business they're in or what it is that they're building or designing or developing, don't think of the disability market as someone that's going to use whatever it is that they've created, right?
sure.
They just don't think about it. And that's one of the strongest messages that I try to, push across in many of the podcasts, interviews, and things that I do. In when I speak in lectures that I give at universities and in front of other companies, is start thinking accessibility, because
Mm,
you're leaving a lot of money, a lot of potential customers out there on the table just because you haven't designed or haven't thought about ensuring that your site is keyboard accessible. Most
interesting.
technologies used by people with disabilities use an interaction model that requires, if and I'm thinking about this from a technical standpoint, use a keyboard interaction model. Some use voice IO, that's becoming more popular, but still the keyboard model, interaction model, is the most popular.
So what we're saying here is there's shoppers out there that literally want to buy from you, and they just can't even. They're almost like they're outside of the store, and
Yeah,
they're like, I know there's awesome clothes in there. So like in a mall, I'm outside of this clothes. I know there's awesome clothes in there. I've heard there's awesome clothes in there, but like they just won't open the door for me.
that's exactly right.
As soon if they just open the door, I'll go and buy all the stuff. You're saying
One of the
that's kind of
most
what we're hearing.
famous Yeah, I'm sorry. One of the most famous lawsuits out there actually got started for that very reason, and it involved Target. And all it simply was is a blind user couldn't log in to the system. So that, username, password, they could not even do that. Later on, they found out they couldn't buy anything. So they had all these, like you said, they had all these products that they wanted to buy. Were all, very motivated buyers, which most people with disabilities are. They're not any different than you and I, in terms of wants and needs, whether it's clothes shopping or grocery shopping or
Mm.
ordering a pizza, from Pizza Hut.
Or buying gifts for their mom or their dad or their sister or their
Exactly.
brother. Yeah.
Exactly. So when we start thinking about designing and developing, and we include that part of the usability or design perspective, and thinking about users with disabilities, it's not nearly as hard as it might sound.
Mm.
I think that's the other big thing, is because we live in a digital society, which kind of replicates what society was like back in the 30s and 40s, which is why things like, the Section 504, the Rehab Act, came out when President Roosevelt was in a wheelchair, right? And so they started to
Mm.
create these things called curb cuts, and all that eventually evolved into the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we started to think, well, do people literally people would think, do they really have that hard of a time getting in and out of doors? Do they really have a hard time crossing streets? Do they have a hard time using the bathrooms? Yeah, that's why we have all of those modifications in the brick and mortar environment that we
Interesting.
live in.
So now we're
Now
kind
the
of doing the
transition
same thing
to
in
digital.
digital.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I want
Exactly.
to talk about like the opportunity. Keep kind of drilling down on the opportunity for our audience, which is we talked about our audience a lot before, but essentially it's I think of them as people who are creators first, like they're creative people, but they're trying to build a business for themselves, or they're already building a business and they're trying to scale their business for themselves. And these people typically sell apparel, or they sell supplements, or they sell products online on the internet, right? And
Right.
sometimes these things can be digital products too, templates and all this stuff. And sometimes this could be a subscription service and all this stuff too. Um, what are some of the things that are like the low hanging fruit for them to just be like they're not even thinking about, and it's actually not that hard to do? You're seeing this stuff all the time. What are some of those low hanging fruits?
If you, especially if you're building some sort of online business, regardless of what it is that you're selling, service, subscription, product, or what have you, One of the easiest things to do is to make sure that every image you put up of that product that you're showing has what's called an alternative text description.
Mm.
So this is a very common thing to do within a web environment. Maybe you're working with some of the more common hosted services that are out there that for your platform, and they provide that functionality. So every image, every picture you put up, make sure it has a text description associated with it.
Alt
Now,
text, yeah, and people probably are familiar with this, but like for example, EverBee, right, which people have host their stores with us.
right,
For example, we have the option to where you can modify the alt text. Yeah, so
right.
basic stuff. I agree. Okay, cool.
Exactly. Alternative text doesn't have to be a long parenthetical thing. We're just looking for a short description that tells the person what this thing is on the screen, or maybe what its purpose is, right?
What is the
So
why
again,
behind that? What is the why? Sorry to cut you off, but what is the why? Like, what is that actually going to do? Can you give me a use case where
yeah, sure.
somebody?
Blind people use typically what's called a screen reader. So in short form, that's something that takes what's on the screen and reads it back to the
Okay.
blind user because they obviously can't see it, right? So if you have just an image up there, just a picture of you or a picture of me, all they'll hear is image, in their screen reader, what's voiced back to them, as opposed to saying it's a picture of Mike Paciello and that's a picture of Cody from EverBee. So that's really what it is. Those are the individuals who really get the most out of it.
In that case, I haven't, and forgive like if maybe these are dumb questions, but I just haven't thought about this a whole lot, admittedly.
Right. Mhm.
How does, for example, in this case, that blind person actually even get to know about uh, johnshoes.com? Like, what do you think? What's the use case to where is it a friend sending them this and it's like, hey, this person has this company has the best shoes for you? And what does that use case look like typically?
So you mean use case in terms of a person with a disability? It's really no different than anyone else. How do
Right.
you get? How do you get? I get my stuff, through text messages. I get them through,
Okay.
through links, some referrals. I may get someone call me up and say, "Hey, look, I just over at this site. Here's the URL. Blah 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 dot blah blah blah." Right? Yeah.
Mm.
From a strictly from the standpoint of a browser, right? So what we engage with the web. Not everybody knows that you've got a browser that's sitting in front of you. That's the same way that all people with disabilities interact with.
They
They
just
use the
have, if
same
they can't
browser.
see it, for example, then they have a screen reader. You're saying, so it's
They
kind
have
of the same thing.
technologies. Exactly. Their technology actually interacts with the browser, and the
Okay.
browser does everything that it does on the web. So you're still typing in URLs, you're still cutting and pasting all those features and functions that, as a user without a disability can do, they can do. They just use technologies to do it. A person, say, for example, in a wheelchair, you don't see them as often as much anymore, but they used to use something called a mouth stick, and they would just literally, or mouth pointer, and it would be in their mouth, and they would you know use the keyboard to interact with a browser. Today
Okay.
they use infrared, they use eye tracking systems that allow them. But all that is just a piece of specialized technology that compensates for the disability, whatever that disability is, and allows them to then interact with the browser and the web and their
Beautiful.
computer systems.
Beautiful. Okay. So alt text, like low hanging fruit, easy to do. If it's a
Right,
shirt with a mother, that says like, I love my mom or something like this.
right.
Alt text needs to describe shirts, whatever the alt
Yep.
text would be. I love my mom shirt, something like this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's one piece of low hanging fruit. The next piece of low hanging fruit that I would say a little bit more complicated to do, but it's important because most of the webs, especially if you're building a site where a person has to buy something or subscribe something, has some notion of a form, a form fill, right? So when you sign up to a site, you put in your username and your password. That's a couple of form fields that you have to fill out. If you're buying something, usually they list there's a counter in there, right? So the counter is a type of form field on the web. So my next recommendation is focus on making sure those form fields are accessible and usable. Now, I said that's a little bit easier said than done because if you're the average person who's subscribed to Everbee and your hosted site, likely you're not doing a whole lot in terms of your own coding. right?
Yeah.
So you're
Using
relying
a
on
platform to take care of that.
you got it. You're relying on the platform. That, by the way, is why the company that I work for is so popular. And again, I'm not here to make a commercial for Audio Eye, but this is exactly where they excel at. We complement the platforms that managed host systems provide with the accessibility that they need so that the users really don't even have to think about it. It's done. And where it needs to get remediated and it's monitored on a constant 24 by 7, 365 basis, it gets done for them. That's the easiest way to approach accessibility,
Yeah.
especially for small businesses and creators like your
I could see
uh,
that too. I think
audience.
about the platonic ideal of this would be that they use like our creators, our business owners, the people that use EverBee, they don't actually have to think about all this. Like the platform already thinks about all this for
Right.
them.
Yep.
That's the platonic ideal. Uh,
Exactly.
uh, and so that's where it's like it's interesting for me to like talk to you about this because I'm like, oh yeah, we could build that into EverBee. We could build that into EverBee. We could build that into EverBee. And
Yeah.
that's the goal.
And it's a
But
value proposition that works for all your clients, all your clientele. You
yeah.
put it on the platform, you build it in, and again, they're it's great because we want them to think about accessibility. We want them to think about expanding their customers to
Mhm.
people to include people with disabilities, but knowing that they don't have to worry about it because your hosted service provides that for them. That feature and those functions there for them. Yeah, that's a value proposition for a host, a managed host system, and your subscribers that you can't beat.
For that form that you're talking about, for example, let's say the counter, right? Like let's say
Sure.
they're in the cart. Let's just go
Yep.
through it, and like they're in the cart, so they want to buy this shirt, and they also want to buy these pants. Okay,
Right.
so there's one and one. What
Yep.
would the accessible, like, what would be the ideal scenario there?
Well, if you're thinking about redesigning it, don't. That's another thing that's really important about accessibility. The World Wide Web Consortium, which I'm sure you're familiar with, had launched in 1997. In fact, I launched it. I created that office for them. The Web Accessibility Initiative, and out of that office, that program office, came guidelines that are called the WCAG guidelines or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines.
Okay.
Those guidelines provide all of the programmatic code, the way to write HTML, the way to write CSS. This is the style, the stuff like that. Again, the average user probably doesn't even pay attention to this,
Mm-hmm.
but that's where all the guidelines for making something usable and accessible are. My point being this: just because you create, it's less important about how you create a counter or a form field. Um, because if you follow the content accessibility guidelines, you'll be able to code them correctly. It's less about that. It's what's probably more important that you have to pay attention, which would have been the third area that I would have said, is the overall navigation of the site. Now
Mm.
that is something that has to be done correctly. So when you think about an average website, it's got a whole bunch of stuff on it, but it also has generally a layout, right? A navigational scheme to it. So you think most sites have, a menu bar, a
Mm-hmm.
navigational bar. On the bottom, there's there's the footer of the page, and then you've got the middle section, generally whatever kind of content. Doesn't really matter what that content is in the middle, it can be made accessible. Even if it's video, you can put built-in captioning into into the video,
Mm.
descriptive video for the blind. Even if it's some sort of moving characters and things like that, animation, all of that can be made accessible by coding it according to those guidelines that are being produced by the World Wide Web Consortium.
Interesting. I could see this getting so much better for as a market, just in general with AI and just it's automatic transcribing and like
Yep.
all this stuff. I imagine this is just amplifying and actually accelerating this whole initiative. I imagine.
That's exactly right. Yeah, automated captioning is going out. It's become very popular right now. There's a number of things where AI has been really really helpful at that level. Now, again, to be fair, like everybody else, um, you can't just rely on automation. A lot of
Okay.
work is highly personalized. So the people who are developing the software and the platforms need to really understand what they're doing. So in terms of AudioEye, we give you a great platform to work with, and it does an awful lot in helping you through automation in artificial intelligence to make your website accessible. But there's an awful lot there that still needs to be done manually at the source code level, particularly wherever possible. And that takes expertise. It is a specialty from that standpoint.
Absolutely, but the market size is large when it comes to, like, it's important to understand, like, well, things are hard and things are, this is a specialty, this is a niche. But if you understand, like, well, yeah, it's hard, but it's worth it though. Usually it's like all of a sudden it's like, well, it doesn't really matter if it's hard or not, because it's just worth it. And so that's why I like want to understand. I want to understand it, and I also want to share with people listening to this of like, it may be a little bit extra effort to do that with your alt text and do these other things, like with you putting the description of your video inside of it. But if you do it, like, you're also now appealing to 25% of people that you wouldn't normally have appealed to. And I think we were talking about this. There's like 1 billion people
over 1 billion people right now worldwide.
And this is people that are probably want to shop a site, but maybe can't, maybe they can, but most of the time they probably can't. This is not a simple like 10 million people across the world. Like, this is 1 billion people that have money in their pocket, just like everybody else. They have a problem that they need to solve with a product, but they just aren't able to, because just your site isn't built for it.
Let me tell you something else that's also very important that I've learned over the years. When people with disabilities find something that works for them, they are loyal. They are brand loyal. So that's another real good motivation for the creators or for the folks that are building their businesses out there. If you start appealing to that population segment of people with disabilities, you're going to find that you have very, very loyal buyers. They come back in droves, and they kind of like remind me of my grandparents. They always went to the same grocery store. They didn't care which, what else was building around them. This is where we always go to Luigi's. I'm Italian, right? So I always go down to Luigi's, go down there. And that's what we do. They're very, very loyal to that, and they rarely will ever break off.
You know what? Rarely. I could totally see that. My cousin has CP, cerebral palsy, and I totally see that with her. And she's like, she's so amazing in so many ways, but the fact that I totally see that. I'm just like, and I also makes sense. Why would you break off when it's like, you know what you're going to get, you know what to expect from this company or this service, you know what you're going to get, they're built for you, because everything else is kind of challenging.
Right.
So it's like, why would you even risk it, to like go?
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. Again, if you think about it, I was saying earlier, what the web and what the internet have done for people with disabilities at large is created a something, which is what they really want, is to be a little bit more on an equal basis with everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't have to go in my wheelchair now and get into a car, drive to the bank, find a teller that can get that may or may not be accessible to me in a wheelchair, right? Unless I've got one of the wheelchairs that elevates automatically, the Dean Kamen type wheelchairs that he made, all-terrain wheelchairs. But rather, I could just stay at home. Not that we're trying to keep you at home, but I could do things easier. I could do my banking. I can do my shopping. I could do my registering, pay my taxes, any kind of government service. I could do online education. All of those things now that are out there that have become norms in a digital society and digital economy have made it much easier for people with disabilities at large, as long as we do our part. And that says we've got to make it usable and accessible to them. Absolutely. I like Ram Charan's approach to the digital economy. I don't know if you know Ram Charan. He's a well-known industry pundit. He was Jack Welch's right-hand man for years at GE. But Ram Charan has recently written a book about competitive advantage in the digital economy. And the thing that resonated with me most is he said, we're living in an age of personalization. This is the age of personalization. And that's one great way to look at accessibility, is the personalized user experience. Eventually, now this is where I get into the tech side of this in the field that I work in. Eventually, we're going to create a web and a digital society where the user won't have to use assistive technology. The system and the interface will adapt to the user.
Love that.
It will know. It will know. That's the ultimate vision.
I agree with that, and that's it's part of our vision too at EverBee. Is we've kind of said the same thing. Now there's some things that needs to happen, sequentially, I guess, for that to happen. But that's the ideal scenario, right? It's like, how does this person already? How when you come to my store, how does my store already know everything about you, Mike? It knows.
Right.
And I'm talking about secure wise, right? We're not talking about security here, but like, let's just assume that like everybody has good intent and it's secure. It also understands like what your fears are, what your uncertainties are, maybe your kids, your wife, like your dog, that your size, what kind of glasses you wear.
Yep. Sure.
And I, assuming again, all this is protected, that is the ideal. And also if you have a disability, it understands your disability and it could actually just cater exactly to you. And that's the ideal.
Until then, the big question is, well, how do I know really what these people with disabilities need? How do I become a maker and a creator and build it? So go to the World Wide Web Consortium, look for the Web Accessibility Initiative and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These guidelines are international, so you don't have to worry about anything you build according to those guidelines makes it usable and accessible and compliant with everywhere else in the entire world. These are the guidelines, worldwide guidelines, okay? The second thing I would recommend is contact your local disability constituency organization. Usually there's a constituency organization who services the blind, services the deaf, services individuals. Like the VA is a huge one, right? The Paralyzed Veterans of America activity there. There's a lot of those constituencies. Get in touch with them, talk to them, ask them, how do they use it? What do they need? What do I need to do to get you? So it's like doing your own little market survey. How do I get you to come to my site? What do you need? What can I do to make sure that you could buy shoes or you could subscribe to my podcast? What do I need to do? And they will be more than happy to help you do that.
I bet. There were some other benefits too that I was looking up a couple days ago before our call today. Was how does this stuff kind of help a brand also? Like, what's the point of doing this? Obviously, we have the impact of the people. We have more revenue, I guess you could say. But what are some other like soft benefits? I would say, and a couple things that I wanted to run by you was we talked about the reach already, 1 billion people globally. To the legal risk, there is legal actually risk for not being compliant in this stuff, which isn't really the fun stuff to talk about. So we'll stay away from that for now. The SEO. Like the SEO benefits, actually, like when Google and like all this stuff, they actually reward sites.
They do.
And they perform, like your site will actually perform better in search when you have a cleaner, more intuitive experience for all users, including people with disabilities.
And Google's algorithms look for accessibility. They're trained to look for accessibility. I know that for a fact. So there's another advantage to what that will do in terms of your SEO and building your search results at that level where you are in that continuum. Yep.
Love it. Yeah. And then the one that I think is you already covered was kind of your reputation, your brand reputation, right? Yeah. As soon as you have a reputation of being accessible to that certain type of audience, you just have you're building a great brand and people will just come back, and obviously that increases your lifetime value, increases your word of mouth, your virality, all that good stuff.
Right. Yeah, take a page out of Apple and Microsoft's a book about marketing 101 when it comes to disabilities and people with disabilities. You look at some of the most amazing infomercials and commercials and stuff that's on the web right now. They very often include people with disabilities in all of their ads that are out there. So that's something. And one of the reasons why they do that, like it or not, they get the sympathy buyer to go in there and say, if Apple or Microsoft are doing this or that to ensure that games are accessible for kids, and I'm building a game that I think, or an educational, platform for it. If they're doing it, why shouldn't I? Right. And
Mhm.
then do a podcast, an ad about it, show it. People
Mhm.
want to know. That's marketing and PR are two of the biggest ways of driving business and creating new business. Put someone with a disability in your ad, or tell about how you make your site usable and accessible to people with disabilities. I think you will immediately gain, certainly the disability market, but you're going to get the non-disabled, the population of individuals who are just buyers, just because of that natural empathic, sympathetic, that feeling that most humans have for one another.
Interesting. I think
Like you
this is
said, underserved markets.
totally.
Yeah,
I mean, I just looking at the time; it's already 30 minutes. But I want to get to the rapid fire questions. Are you ready for rapid fire?
sure. Go ahead.
What's your favorite business book?
It's the one that I just referred to, "Rethinking Competitive Advantage" by Ram Charan.
Beautiful. What's one thing that you wish that you knew before starting your businesses in the past, which we didn't talk about, but I know that you're a serial entrepreneur as well.
Um, my background has always been in technology. I really didn't understand and know business. I wish I had taken the time to learn it. But fortunately, I got involved with Motorola Ventures right early on, and they surrounded me with an entire team of business executives and legal people all around me. And so I was able to be successful, and I've created 3 or 4 businesses as a result.
What was the one thing that you wish that you knew before like kind of being involved with those things?
Um, how much work it took,
Hmm.
time and dedication, time and dedication.
Interesting. What's the worst advice that you've ever received about business?
I've gotten a lot of bad advice. The worst advice, ironically, that I've ever received is, you should get involved with this or that person. And I knew that person's biography to an extent, and they had somewhat of a checkered past, and I still went and did it.
Hmm.
And every time I did, I lost. It was a losing value proposition. I either lost money, lost what I was trying to accomplish in terms of a technology or business. I lost a bit. I've lost at least 2 businesses
Hmm.
because of bad
And this is
partnerships.
mostly because you had a gut feeling and you're saying like, and somebody gave you advice, so you kind of put their advice above your gut feeling.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation there. I'd be curious to have, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. How many
Yeah.
hours do you think that you work per week nowadays?
Um, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to
Oh,
100.
you're still very, very active.
I'm supposed to be retired. I did retire for about 5 or 6 years, and then I got looped back into it last year. So,
Oh,
yeah, it probably
good for you. You
I
started.
think 80 is probably fair.
I heard that I've heard this, and I've heard it from a lot of people now at this point that retirement is where you go to die.
Uh,
And I'm not sure if that's fully true, but
I think my wife would probably agree with that. Would probably agree with that where it comes to me. But I've made a promise. I'm committed to being retired by the time I'm 69. Which just is a mathematical equation I worked out with my FA,
okay,
and so I mean, I could really do it by 67 or 68, but 69, my wife will be ready for it by then. So
good,
2 more
awesome.
years, year and a half, year and a
Okay,
half.
awesome. Um, if your family and your friends would kind of get together and write an honest article about you, and you're not allowed to be involved in this process, what are some of the characteristics that they would use to describe you, good and bad?
Yeah, so good. I think empathetic. Um, Certainly someone who is very generous. Those are probably in honest truth is a very very strong characteristic for me. I've written a number of articles and blogs. You'll see them out there on that. It's one of the big problems I've had with marketing the last 5 or 6 years, especially in my own industry. Being truthful, being transparent. I think people would say that was, and that I'm a friendly and amiable person. My bad qualities: I am a workaholic. I am somewhat of a geek, so sometimes you're talking to me and I'm not really listening because my head is off in the clouds somewhere else, thinking
Mm.
about something else that I'm going to do. And I think even though I'm a very people oriented and people centered individual, there are times when I just ignore everybody else and I'm just focused on what makes me feel good. So a little bit of selfishness.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate you being vulnerable there. How would you define a creator? Who is a creator to you?
Um, a creator to me is an inventor, but actually even more than that. And I say that only because I've been using that word creator a little bit more because of where I live. I live in an area in North Carolina where there are a lot of artists. Um, you know, artists in terms of art and painting and things along that line.
Mm.
So they're all over the place, and a lot of friends that I have, and I watch these people do something I literally cannot do. So I see creator, I see imagination, I see vision in ways that I just could never imagine. So that's what I think about when I think about a
Mm.
creator. Someone who's got vision, someone who is truly innovative, someone who is truly
Mm.
creative and has uses their imagination in ways that I just don't have that capacity.
I love it. Do you think, or who do you think should be a business owner?
Anyone that's got an entrepreneurial you know character like myself. Um, Certainly, those are people. That's a typical standard question for anyone that's in business. But I think an entrepreneur can be anyone who comes up with an idea that they think will make a contribution to anything in terms of society. Particularly, that's my focus is making a contribution, right? Um, and just talked about art. Art is a contribution, right? Just the way as the next, microchip and what it does and its features and functionalities are contributions that make things better, faster, performance wise at that level. So it's probably not the greatest answer in the world,
No, that's
but
a great answer. Thank you,
okay.
Mike. I appreciate that. Mike, where can people find you and connect with you more and learn more about you?
Yeah, so a couple of ways to find me. I am at Audio Eye, so my company is audioeye.com. That's the easy way to find me. I think I'm up on the webpage and in there somewhere you'll find me. My email address is michael.paciello at audioeye.com. Or you can send email to me to another little startup company. It's kind of a hobby that I have. It's called webable.com. And my email there is mpaciello@webable.com. Those are a couple of ways to get in touch with me.
Beautiful.
LinkedIn, all the social networks, you'll find me. Do a quick search. Usually come up with me. There are not too many Paciellos out there.
And we will link for anybody listening and watching. We'll link to all of Mike's, all of his links below in the show notes or in the description below, depending on where you're watching this. But Mike, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on, adding value to all of us here, myself included. So thank you.
Yeah, Cody, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. And again, I hope this gets out to the masses, to all the folks that are thinking about who am I going to reach, who am I going to get to. Really think about those billion plus people internationally with disabilities that are out there just waiting for you to launch your next project.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.